How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation, and we have a jam-packed video for today's video. Could have worded that better, but yeah, I have 4 topics to cover in today's video, starting out with don't get scammed. Then we're going to talk about the new PS5 Pro teardown and its secret sauce that makes it the best console on the market. After that, there's a great PSN sale going on, so I picked out some of the games that I think are worth picking up. And finally, you can get a PS Portal for $150. It might be worth grabbing one. So yeah, this first story is going to be a quick one, but there's this new type of scam going around where anytime a new movie is being casted, you see an Instagram ad that says, hey, we're looking for actors. You fill out all of your personal info. They say they'll get back to you. And then you see on James Gunn's Twitter that like it's not real because they're just trying to get all your personal info and they know you want to be in Superman Returns or whatever it's called. And it looks like that's working pretty well because now people are getting emails from seemingly CD Projekt Red and they look realistic enough to trick people, and they're advertising beta tests for The Witcher 4. Now, that wouldn't trick me, and I doubt it would trick the vast majority of you, because why would they be beta testing a single player game? There's no reason to do that. They would call it an internal closed test or something like that, just to say, we want to show off the systems that this game is going to use, you know, get people's feedback and kind of switch it up so that it works well and plays well for people at launch. But yeah, apparently enough people have fallen for this scam that CD Projekt Red has come out and said, we will never email you about closed beta tests. And honestly, I understand why some people are getting scammed by this because of the systems that games like Marathon use, where when they're running a closed alpha or beta, you sign up and then you get a code in your email. But like, if you don't see a code in an email for a beta, I would guess 9 times out of 10 that it's fake, right? Or if it's not a multiplayer game, and like if the email signature looks weird. Like, there are a lot of different things you can check as a sort of failsafe or firewall so you don't get scammed. The only reason I brought this one up is because it's The Witcher 4 and it's going to be one of the biggest games of like 2027 or 2028 whenever it's coming out. But yeah, if you see any emails, tweets, or anything like that that aren't coming from the official verified accounts advertising betas for games, chances are it's fake and they're just trying to steal and collect all of your personal info. You don't want to deal with that. E3 leaked all of my personal info when everyone else's leaked. People got my address and my phone number and everything, and they were calling me to like bitch about PlayStation. It was terrible. This guy who was a fan of my friend CZ's World was calling me every night at like 3 a.m. and just breathing into the phone, which was absolutely terrifying because I knew all my stuff was out there. So you don't want your personal info out there, especially if your stuff's on the internet. So yeah, do not fall for this Witcher 4 scam. All right, that brings me to the second news story here, which is Sony released a teardown of the PS5 Pro that's super detailed, and it reveals the secret sauce that makes this console not only look pretty cool, but also run incredibly well as well. The first thing that honestly shocked me a little bit is that the 3 fins that it has instead of the 2 fins that the PS5 Slim and regular PS5 have actually serve a purpose. So they said that it provides increased airflow to get hot air out of the console, which is good because if you're playing graphically intensive games, your console is going to get very hot and you want as much airflow as possible. They also increased the size of the fan and fixed one of the most controversial aspects of the original PS5, which is that one of the fans was louder than the other one. So some PS5s were loud enough to hear and others weren't. They also added more vents on the back of the console for increased airflow. And finally, they added some more pathways for air to travel through and sound to travel through. So when the fan is kicking up, the sound will go out the back of the console and out the top. Of course, some sound is going to escape from the front of the console, but they actually did scientific testing to figure out the best direction for air to travel. So when your console is directly facing you, it won't be loud when the fan kicks up. And I got to give Sony props because between the PS5, PS5 Slim, and PS5 Pro, these are some of the quietest consoles of all time. They did a really good job there. Even with my launch model, I never even hear the fan kick up outside of when I launched the console for the first time after it's been off for a while. And even then, it is as close to dead silent as it gets. The most interesting issue they addressed for me, though, has to do with Wi-Fi speeds. If you're a new viewer of the channel, you probably don't know about the plague I went through with my launch PS5, but essentially the Wi-Fi chip just sucks in the launch PS5. I have great internet here in my house. I have AT&T business class fiber, so it's a gigabit up and down. I had extenders. I replaced those with an Orbi system because those had great reviews. When I'm on Wi-Fi on my PS5 original model, it gets terrible speeds. And on top of that, it drops connection constantly. So if I want to play a game that's always online like Diablo 4, of course, I run into major issues with that on my launch PS5, and they fixed that for both the PS5 Slim and Pro. It turns out that it's not just a better Wi-Fi chip, chip, they actually use special electromagnetic screws to block interference from other devices. So if you have a Nintendo Switch on, a Steam Deck on, a PS Portal on, or your phone on near your PlayStation console, it can kind of like blast away other interfering signals and get a direct connection to your router. And I know it works because I have none of the issues with my PS5 Pro that I had with my launch model. And a lot of people were telling me it was the placement of my console. That's not true because I put the PS5 Pro in the same spot and I moved my PS5 launch model right next to the router that's connected to the router downstairs, and it still has the exact same issues. So something screwed up with the Wi-Fi in the launch PS5, but they fixed it for the PS5 Pro. I understand the major hate boner for the PS5 Pro. They really screwed up with that pricing, especially for an all digital model. But as someone who could afford it and was able to pick it up, I feel like it was definitely worth the money. I get great performance out of it. Sometimes I get better performance out of it than my main PC, because if an Unreal Engine 5 game is being played on the PS5 Pro, the stuttering is still there, but it's spread out over a few frames versus being a 1 second hard stutter that freezes the screen for a second or so on my main PC. And Assassin's Creed Shadows apparently rivals high-end PCs with its PSSR upgrade. So I think the console's worth it, and it's clear that it's not just a thrown together thing. Like, they actually did some upgrades for airflow and Wi-Fi interference that make it a better machine than the regular PS5. At this point, knowing that the PS6 is out in just a couple of years, if you're someone who hasn't upgraded from the PS4, you're someone who should buy a PS5 Pro. But if you have a regular PS5, I think you're sitting pretty with what you currently have. But yeah, if you want to see the full teardown video, I've been using it as B-roll, just head over to the PlayStation blog because the whole article is really interesting. And that brings me to the third news story, which is that there's a great sale running on the PSN right now. It's going to go on for a couple of weeks. There's some great deals on digital games. So I picked out some of my favorites, starting with Alan Wake 2. I gotta be real, I know this is a weird way to start a game I'm recommending. I think Alan Wake 2, if you're a big survival horror fan, is pretty overrated. It's a lot more of a walking sim than an actual survival horror game, and half the game has great combat when you're playing as Saga, but when you're playing as Alan Wake in the Nightmare world, the combat's just terrible. Like, they somehow screwed up this great combat system that they had in the first game. They made it better for Saga Anderson, like aiming with the flashlight and using impactful, powerful guns. Then you play as Alan Wake and you're using like a light switch flashlight to solve puzzle. I don't know. I don't like playing as Alan Wake in that game, which sucks because he's a great character, but it's on sale for $30. It's one of the best looking games on the PS5. It is really cool overall. I'd give it like an 8 or 9 out of 10. As someone, one of the few who played Alan Wake when it came out, it did feel like a little bit of a downgrade, just being real. One of the biggest surprises for me this generation is Dead Island 2. Now, they've been keeping the price pretty high on this game since it launched on PS5. This is the cheapest I've seen it. It's officially been out for 2 years now, and it's at $20. I beat this game. I thought it was great. Once you start unlocking guns, it really opens up the combat, and it is a surprisingly good recreation of LA. It's an open area game. Think something like Dark Souls, where it's a big map overall, but you have loading screens in between the different areas. I prefer that because you get a little bit more of a handcrafted feel, and there's less bloat connecting all the areas where nothing is happening. It's got great melee combat that directly inspired Dying Light. So if you like the melee combat in that, or the weapons combat, play Dead Island 2, because, you know, the people who made Dead Island moved on to make Dying Light, then a bunch of studios took over Dead Island 2 and kind of just made their combat better. And I like the parkour in Dying Light, but I prefer the combat in Dead Island 2. It's just a great zombie game from top to bottom and looks and runs great on the PS5 and PS5 Pro. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, if you haven't played this, is $15. I've talked a lot about that game on this channel. I don't got to tell you why it's great. If you missed it, it's one of the best games on the PlayStation platform. A game that's definitely underrated and underplayed is Sniper Elite 5. It has a cool invasion mode that's inspired by Dark Souls, where other players can invade your game and take on an NPC, and then you have to find them and snipe them. It's only $15. It reminds me of Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, not necessarily 5 because it's not open world, but it's a little more open, so it reminds me of Peace Walker. I really enjoyed it. And finally, Uncharted: The Legacy of Thieves collection that includes Uncharted 4 and The Lost Legacy is $20. This game is almost 10 years old and it still looks like it came out today. It's one of my all-time favorite games, and it honestly might be my favorite first party game ever. There's probably something I'm forgetting, but Uncharted's my all-time favorite PlayStation franchise. Makes me kind of want them to bring it back in the right way. But if you haven't played Uncharted 4, get it with the Lost Legacy, because the Lost Legacy is great too. And for 20 bucks, I mean, you've got at least a couple weekends worth of game there that's going to make you cry at the end of it. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff on sale, so make sure you scroll through the list of games. It seems like this is one of the best sales in a while, so you're not going to want to miss it. And finally, that brings us to the last story, which is that the PlayStation Portal has reached its all-time low price of $150. The only caveat is you have to get a used unit, but honestly, because of how limited this console is, like it's really just a streaming device connected to an Android tablet, I don't really think you're going to run into issues using this used. And the fact that you really need to be in your house to actually use this streaming console with your PlayStation 5 means that people who owned it before you probably didn't take it outside their house. So if you're not really someone who likes buying used tech, especially used handhelds, I feel like this is one of the only devices I would recommend buying used. I still don't have one of these, mainly because I have a Steam Deck OLED and the Wi-Fi chip is much better in the Steam Deck than what you get in the PS Portal. So if you use the free app Chiaki, it basically becomes a PS Portal and does the exact same thing a lot better. It also has an OLED screen, which I prefer, but you do lose out using the Steam Deck on the haptic feedback and adaptive triggers that come along with the Sense controllers that they cut in half and plastered to the screen. So if you don't have a Steam Deck and you're not into PC gaming at all, it's really the only option you have to play handheld PS5 games, and I think they're pretty cool. It's clear that there's a market for the PS Portal because it sells incredibly well. So if you want to get your hands on one, maybe look at these used units that are going for 150 bucks. They keep updating it all the time, which makes it an easy pickup if you own a PlayStation 5. Anyway, guys, that's all I've got for you in this PS5 update. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.